it was so unstable at home. I go, well, I saw my brother get removed from the social service system, and I was like, well, that must be my way out, right? So I ended up I had triple felony charges by the age of, I think at that point I was 11.
Each one of us has a story. It's being written in moments of both joy and pain, in life's triumphs and its tragedies. It holds the power to inspire, to deliver hope, to bring change, but only if we will use the power of a voice.
Brendan, thank you for being here. The power of a voice. You have had an interesting life. Let's start there, right?
Okay.
Everybody has a story. Tell me about you.
Sure. So, Brendan Bartic.
Ta-da.
Yeah, ta-da. So now I own a real estate brokerage, a real estate team, a coaching company. So we coach agents across the country and train real estate agents, elite real estate agents, and a title company, and so several businesses. And then my passion is my charity work is what's called the Third Way Center. So Third Way Center has 5 residential group homes that assist kids that have come from pretty much the worst situations on earth. Everything from abuse to traumatic brain injuries to fetal alcohol syndrome. And that program runs from ages 11 to about 23. We have some even aftercare programs that help find job placement and all of that. But on any given day, we're housing anywhere from 100 or so disadvantaged youth. Just recently, I became the president of the board of directors. And
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and so I've been with them now for 6 years. And the reason I got involved is because I actually was a resident there when I was younger.
Tell me that story.
Yeah, so unfortunately, my family structure wasn't the best. My mom was manic depressive, schizophrenic, and my dad was a alcoholic Vietnam veteran who was dealing with PTSD. So my youth or my growing up didn't go very well. My brother, I had a brother who was 5 years older than me. He was removed from the house by social services when I was 6 because issues and abuse and drugs and
How
all of
do
these
you
things.
get there?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of times when you look at the family structure, it's misdiagnosis. You have the VA administration trying to help somebody with PTSD and not really quite sure how that was way back then. It's gotten better, I'm sure, now.
So somebody knocked on your door
Knocked on my door to
know that your parents weren't well, that they removed your brother.
Oh yeah, no. So it wasn't like that. No, it was like, hey, you got to go. No, so during all this, after my brother was gone and he went into youth services, then the family structure got even worse because my mom was she went into a facility, into a psych ward, because she kind of had a nervous breakdown once that happened and tried to commit suicide several times. So we would go visit her at the hospital. Me and my dad at that point, which was where my brother was gone. And he wasn't handling it well, so he would, self-medicate. And
what did you think was going on? And what age were you?
It was the weirdest thing because, I would go to these hospitals, or go to the hospital and see her literally in a straitjacket. And, when you're 7 or 8 years old, you're trying to, understand what happened and what's weird. And then when you're at school, you try to go back to school, and then your parents don't come to parent-teacher, they don't come to anything, and nor did I want them to, because they would either show up medicated on, alcohol and prescription medication and cause a scene. So it was, I think you block a lot of it out. You try to have this kind of avoidance and just go. I mean, there's periods where I just don't remember most of it.
To this day.
Oh, to this day, yeah. So, yeah, where it's just locked out. So the way that I ended up in Third Way Center was, I think, because during all this, like so many kids, I didn't know how to handle it, so I started to act out. And prior to that, I was, straight A's, all of this. And when my mom went into, being institutionalized, it got weird. So I started getting in trouble.
Could your mother talk to you? Did it explain?
Yes, but she was so emotional. So it would be super highs, super lows. Then we would sit in these, group meetings with, the counselors which is, if you've ever been to an institution, it's not they're doing the best they can, but they're dealing with all kind of other people's families and all this. So you're sitting in a room with, another family next to you where the dad's raped the daughter, right? You're sitting 3 more seats down from another person who's on heroin. And so you're in these like group meetings back in this was, the 80s. I mean, really, kind of the late 80s going into the early 90s. And I don't know if people really understood a lot, of how to handle these kind of scenarios.
As a little boy, do you think that this is real life, like normal?
No, because it was weird. I remember just, being in the cafeteria at the hospital and, all my other friends are, playing soccer or whatever it was. And I was just like, this doesn't seem to be normal. So with knowing that, I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, it was just so unstable. So my way out was I was like, all right, well, it was so unstable at home. I go, well, I saw my brother get removed from the social service system, and I was like, well, that must be my way out, right? So I ended up I had triple felony charges by the age of, I think at that point I was 11. So I got into an altercation with a kid, got into a fight while playing a football game, just, kids out in a park. And we got into a fight. He, got, beat up a little bit. He was
Just
fine.
a little.
He was fine. It's like kids fighting. It was just kids fighting. Well, he goes home and his mom freaks out, gets a restraining order put against me. So the cops show up at my house. My mom's gone. My dad freaks out, beats me to the inch of my life. I thought I was going to die. My best friend, his dad was a big. He had a lot of weapons, a lot of guns. So took a shotgun, went to this kid's house because again, was not in the right kind of mindset. And we snuck up. Me and 2 of my buddies snuck up behind his house while he was having his birthday party.
Oh.
And this is in Aurora. I grew up in Aurora. And we're about, 200, maybe 100 yards from the house. And we're in the back. We snuck up through this creek. We knew this creek well. And, it's stupid. And we're sitting there. And the whole idea was just to scare this kid because we're stupid. I mean, I think I was 11. I might have been 10. This is how stupid it was. Shotgun goes off. So, and I'm so far back, a shotgun, it sprays like pellets. So luckily, I was far enough back. It hits the house. Every window breaks, shatters. People are screaming, freaking out. None of them got through enough to actually harm anybody. Thank goodness. But so I got charges for. Yeah, they eventually got all downgraded, but from everything from trespassing. At first, it was attempted murder. It was like,
wow.
Yeah, because I unloaded a shotgun on someone's house. So it was.
And your buddies?
They were with me, so they were just accomplices. But of course, they gave me up in 2 seconds. So we ran. Obviously, they put 2 and 2 together. After a while, they were like, "Who could have been the people that might have wanted to do something like this?" They're like, "Maybe the kid that got in the fight with him." And it was. So I went to. It's called Montview Juvenile Detention Center. I think they gave me 2 years at that point. So went into correctional system. Which was enlightening.
What was enlightening about that?
Well, I mean, then you're in there. So again, at that point, I'm like this 5. I don't even know how tall I was. I was little. I didn't grow until later on, so I was really small. And you go into this detention center with kids that are there was murderers in there, that were serving time to wait till they were 18 to go to prison. One of the kids that I was in the cell next to me, he's the kid back in Highlands Ranch that shot the state trooper in the face. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like the guy went to pull them over and they shot this state trooper. So this guy's like next to me and I'm like, okie dokie. And same thing like regular jail. You have child molesters, you have all of that stuff. You have gangbangers. I mean, everyone's, there. So you find yourself in this new world, which...
Was it better than your old world?
It was. It was actually, it was safer and it was consistent, And as weird as that sounds, it was a lot safer for me to be in there and be incarcerated because you knew
what to expect.
Yeah, you knew what to expect. You knew how it was work. It was still sketchy and the weirdest things, but it was more calming than the unexpectedness of the home life. So
now do you feel more normal?
Oh, yeah. You mean like mentally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about Johnny was playing soccer.
Yeah.
So you were amongst your peers?
Yeah, exactly.
At that age.
Completely. So, and a lot of the kids there were dealing with, all of the, no kid there was just like, I want to wake up and go to jail. It was all avoidance, escape, and everyone you talked to was either they had a single parent, they had no parents. A lot of people were living with their grandma, or so you just see how you're a product of your environment, of course. And it was interesting because when you're incarcerated there, you would think there would be more mindset on how do we treat these kids. It was much more like jail. It was like, how do we punish these kids? Which I understand too, as I think taxpayers are like, well, if you're 16 and you steal a car, you need to be punished. Yeah, maybe it's more if you're 16 and you stole a car, why'd you steal the car? You're not quite comprehend. You're not an adult.
You're not old enough.
Yeah, you're not. You're just like. You're trying to be cool. You're trying to fit in. You don't know what the heck you're doing, but you still harm someone. So I understand the balance of like treatment versus punishment, I guess. So I was assigned a caseworker. A great guy, still, Chris Lake. He became what they call a guardian ad litem. So in the state of Colorado at that time, once you had a triple felony, you couldn't go home. Like that was a rule that they made because they were like, obviously, if you have triple felonies, you're in a weird position. So I got assigned a caseworker, got out of juvie, and they put me in a foster home.
Who picked you up?
The caseworker. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the caseworker picked me up, Chris Lake, it was his name, and took me to this house in Aurora that was a foster house. Her name was Miss Willis. This older lady, her husband worked for Greyhound buses, and so it was me and 5 other foster kids there who had come out of the correctional facility. So she would take these kids because I think she went through a hard time growing up, and she provided a place for us to go because there wasn't really anywhere to go because the beds were full at Third Way Center, and so it's kind of like a hotel in a lot of ways. You can't get in because there's not enough beds. There's not enough funding to create more beds, and at the time there was maybe 2 or 3 other types of group home or. So a foster home is just like you could have a foster home, right? You could have kids there and whatever. You're not a doctor, you're not anything. So she's doing the best with. So I'm there with a literally this guy. We called him Little Damien. He was a Trey Deuce gangster Crip, and so he'd wake up every morning. He would take his blue Crip bandana, iron it on the ironing board. Big African American guy. And I'm sitting there and I'm like 5'2" little white kid, just got out of jail, and I'm like, oh. He was like, come on, you're coming with me. We're going down to Colfax. I'm like, okay. So you don't know. It seems surreal now. But yeah, and so I'm going down and smoking blunts with these gangbangers down in Colfax. Because what else was I going to, I didn't, there wasn't, and then you start thinking you're cool and you go through all these identity things. It's like, oh, I want to be a gangster because gangsters are cool, and so you start idolizing this culture that when you have no direction, you're like, yeah, it's cool to sell drugs. And I now see clearly now from the inside out how this happens, right, to so many kids. And
In the house mom, I forget her name,
Miss Willis, yeah.
Miss Willis.
Yeah.
No control.
Very well. Again, so I was on an ankle bracelet. So I had a tracker because they let me out just on that. I think I served 9 months in detention. Then I was on a tracker. So we'd be like, oh, we're going to go to the park. Right, because she had 5, these kids, and she was like, all right, just make sure you're back by whatever. You'd have to call your tracker to release this thing, so you don't get the cops to show up and all this stuff. But yeah, we would get like 2 to 3 hours. It would be a Saturday, and we're catching the bus down to Colfax. We're not going to the park, right? And we're doing bad kid stuff.
But you went home for dinner.
To her house.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I had to. Otherwise, my tracker would go off. So if my tracker went off, I would have had to go serve 2 more years immediately after that. Which ended up happening. I ended up getting my tracker off, got in an altercation, I had another felony assault charge. Me and some of the kids from the group home got in a fight with a bunch of other kids, and so ended up went back to detention, went back to Montview to the correctional facility.
Is that common?
Oh, all the time. It's like, and that's the hardest part. Once you're in, it's because then you're also on probation. You have trackers and all of these things, and the craziest part is they're still billing your parents. Like my parents were getting charged for all of this stuff that I had been doing because they're still legally responsible for me. So there's like fees for the It's all a money pit too. I mean, there's a whole racket.
I never knew that.
It's a racket.
And how were your parents going to pay?
Exactly. I mean, and they were, my dad worked at a like a quick print, like he was a printer, like that made like our listing brochures, right? Like that's literally what his job was, and so wasn't making anywhere near good money. We lived in a home that had been foreclosed on in Aurora. I mean, it was I think 1,400 square feet, something like that. So eventually, the next time I got out of detention, there was a bed open at Third Way Center.
Your probation officer again?
Yep, caseworker.
Yeah. Casey.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So connected me there, dropped me off, and yeah.
How do you feel about that guy at this point?
The caseworker?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I mean, there's a lot of good people in the system that really want to help kids, and you see it. I mean, these guys and gals make nothing, right? It's the lowest pay. They're dealing with little jerk-offs like me, who are angry, pissed off, have no idea why we're, so mad. And you got to remember at this point, what people don't see behind the scenes is everything I own on earth is in a white trash bag, which is very little. It's like one other maybe change of clothes. You don't have anything, nothing, barely a toothbrush, that they issue you in the detention center. And so you show up to Third Way, and then you go into this whole nother environment because I think almost each house houses between 10 to 15 kids, depending upon the house structure. So you come in, and now you're with kids from a whole nother universe because also most of them are they have guys and girls. So you're coming out of jail, which is all guys. Then you come into here and, now there's girls. And a lot of the girls are there because they've been sexually assaulted. They've we house a lot of girls that were pregnant at 11, 12, and 13, and parents kicked them out because they said, and a lot of religious, cultural things where it was like, so this was like the end of the road where you ended up in this house, and Third Way has to go, we've got to help these kids. So the founder, her name's Dr. Hildegard Messenbaugh, she, came up with this program of treating youth trauma. And it's kind of a 5-box system that you go through all these things. So it's heavily, it's a lot of counseling, it's a lot of anger management, a lot of medication, because what they're now understanding is most of the kids in some form or fashion just like the football players, had a traumatic brain injury. So a lot of the things that we're doing wrong were because my mom hit me with a frying pan when I was, 6, and it was never, reconciled. It'd be like getting, hit by a 400-pound linebacker 16 times because your brain's not developed fully at that point. So it's even more traumatizing. So you're dealing with this, and they're like, do we medicate you? Do we treat you? And plus, you're hormonal. You're a kid, you're like, you want to make out with everyone. You want to, burn things. You want to, you don't know what the heck you're doing. You're just trying to figure it
brains,
out. Yeah. You're just like, how do I get a beer?
Yeah.
It's like, I want a beer. And you're like, oh, beer's gross, and, all those things. So you're trying to figure all those things out. And then also you have to come to the realization that now you're a group home kid. So regular school, they started taking us to East High School. So we would pull up in this white van down the street because we couldn't pull up to the school because we already were weirdos, right? And it was like the United Nations of group home kids. So it'd be me, like, 2 other girls, an African-American guy, a Latino guy, and we're all from these weird scenarios that led to here. And then they're like, yeah, go to school and act normal, as best you can, because and there was rules that said we had to go to school. You couldn't be like homeschooled at that time. Third Way Center has now built its own high school, so now we have our own high school, which is like a safe haven, thank goodness. But I'm showing up at East High School,
And you're scattered
because at different ages too, like there, different things at this point. And so it was unique.
The kids know you came on the white bus?
No, we tried. Not everyone. Of course, when you started meeting people, because they were like, "Oh, well, why don't we go to your house?" And we're like, yeah, like you're not coming over, right? Like we're not. That's never going to happen, And I mean, a lot of us were on probation. We had different things. We had to take piss tests, every whatever. So you're trying to figure out, can I smoke this joint and try to still get away with it, and all these things. So otherwise, I'll violate probation. So you're like a little mini criminal adult trying to figure out why you're like this. Then you're going to hours of counseling because you have to, they're trying to treat you and trying to explain why you are this way and why your anger is this way and how do you funnel all of this, pain and, trauma.
When you say, you can't go to my house, what does that do?
Oh, it destroys you. Yeah, you feel like a weirdo. You feel like you're such an outcast to the rest of, you just want to be normal. You know what I mean? And so once that happens, then you just get more angry. Mm-hmm. This rebellious cycle, becomes even stronger. And then you start, I think the biggest challenge is you start to lose hope, right? You're like, I'm kind of destined to work at a gas station, or I'm kind of destined to be a criminal, a career criminal. And that's kind of what I was thinking at the time. I was like, my 2 options are, work, at Walmart. No offense to people that worked at Walmart, but like a checker at Walmart was like the highest aspiration I could look towards, because I ended up getting my GED because I couldn't get there's no way I could have made up as much school as I missed from incarceration and all of those different things. So I was like, great, I got a GED. I go, what am I going to do? And so I watch kids' hope just gets destroyed. And that's one of the biggest things we focus on now is we have an internship for the Third Way kids where they come to our office. We do a lot of vision boards, goal setting, and just go, look, just because you got this, you're in this scenario, right? And it sucks. And I'm talking to the kids all the time, and I'm like, it sucks. I get it. It's a moment in time, right? Like you can still do whatever you want in this world. There's still so many people that want to help you get to wherever you want. And there was so many people that helped me. I mean, there was, endless amounts of, grants and funding to help, do certain things.
For you?
Yeah. For me in Third Way Center, like I could have, gone to college if I wanted to. There was people there in place so there was a lot of good in it. The problem is I didn't want it. And I didn't understand how it all worked because I was so pissed off at everyone.
And did you know when the counselors were talking to you, do you know as a little boy, I'm pissed because my mom whacked me?
No idea.
And how do they get there?
You don't. I think it takes you a long. Hopefully, they explain a lot of things to you, which you're trying to comprehend. A lot of it is medication, so you're on, they're trying to find the right, whether
formula,
it's Zoloft, whether it's, they're trying everything to try to figure out how to balance these inconsistencies in your brain so you can not lose it. You know,
Is it all about the brain?
it's all about the brain. I mean, the studying of all of it now. I mean, it is such a massive piece of this. Is people don't intentionally want to be bad. There's no one that wakes up and goes, you know what, I want to have a shitty life. You know what I mean? That never happens as a kid. There's chemical imbalances. Then you compare that with terrible environments. It produces criminals. I mean, that's just a recipe, a formula. Or, I mean, we have a lot of, and it's tough right now too because a lot of them go into the sex trade and all of this. I mean, we have to protect our houses and the identities and addresses because like perverts are trying to like, because they know these are the most susceptible type of girls or boys, both ways. So there's a lot of that going on, and so yeah. So the process with Third Way Center is you have almost levels of houses. So you kind of go from a lockdown facility in a lot of ways where like, again, even when I was at East High School, like there's somebody waiting there, you have to get out and you never have a moment of free time really. You're kind of monitored throughout the most of the time. Then, there's even a higher lockdown house than that where you can't even go to school because these are the kids that are like, they'll stab you with a pencil. Like they're still trying to figure out things of just normal. They're like hysterical. So then you kind of graduate and then you end up at what they call Lincoln House, which is more of an emancipation home. So it's you kind of get your own apartment. They help you start learning how to budget a checkbook. They get you job placement. I worked for a phone card company called Ideal Dial, and I was 17 making phone cards. But that's when phone cards was a big thing back in the day. And so, and then the goal is to help you become an adult and help you, emancipate, literally emancipation, just, that you can be on your own. And then they have
Are you
aftercare.
told that it's all about the brain?
No, not then.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they've learned a lot even since then. A lot of it, I think, what they were trying to figure out along the way was they knew a lot of it had to do with chemical imbalances in the brain, but not actually traumatic brain injuries that were such a major factor in why this happens. You can even imagine. Like I remember my parents just saying, "Your brother's just evil." They just thought he was that he was.
Where's your brother now?
Incarcerated. Yeah. So my brother, talking about the brain things, so when he was born, he didn't get enough oxygen. I guess the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. And so if you don't get enough oxygen to your brain, pieces of your brain get damaged. And so he had brain damage but when I say brain damage, not like, oh, you would notice he had brain damage. It was like, you would think he was pretty normal, except for he would lose it in 2 seconds to the point where like he would just start smashing things.
And he didn't know why.
Didn't know why. And so your parents also are ill-equipped to deal with this. Mix that with alcohol and them having their own issues. And they're going, our kid's he's just an evil little bastard, And I remember hearing that all the time, right? Because they were just like, yeah. So you go, wow, well, my brother's, jacked up. I must be jacked up too. So you kind of, and so who knows, right? And so you're trying to figure this all out. So with Third Way, as we start to graduate kids and then follow up with them, I made a decision, and there's these weird times in life that are bizarre. I was actually at the Aurora Mall, and
shopping for what?
Probably shoplifting. So I was 17, living at the Third Way Center, and I saw a Army recruiting station inside the mall. And I swear, and I don't, I'm not a big like spiritual type person, but there was like this light that was literally like shining on this recruitment center. And I just realized I was like, I'm going to join the Army. And so I went in there. 2 weeks later, I shipped out to Fort Stewart, Georgia, which is outside of like
Who's
Atlanta.
giving you permission
I had
to
just
that?
I had just emancipated. So once I emancipate, I can make my own legal decisions as a 17-year-old. And at the time, the Army was the only place that would allow you to be 17 and also to have a GED. Now, since you have to have a high school diploma and you have to be 18. This was back then, and like they needed people, I guess. Luckily. So I walk into this recruiting station, and they show me these videos of, all this, and you have to take this like test to figure out what you're, able to do. And I could have done quite a bit, but I saw, people blowing up stuff and shooting stuff, which was the infantry, the United States Army infantry. And I was like, that looks cool. And poor choice in retrospect, because, it would have been better being like a medic or like a tech guy or something.
Young and dumb. Okay.
Yeah. You're like, let's jump out of planes. It's awesome. So then I went to the military, and so arrived at boot camp. And again, I'm still not stable at this point. Like, it sounds like third way was great. Third way did the best they could for me. But I had a tongue piercing at the time. I remember this because I had to take it out when I was at, I'm still not right.
Okay, so how did boot camp go? Whoa.
Boot camp worked really well for me because I loved structure, and I also loved, in a lot of ways, competition. So I was always extremely competitive, even now. Like, if everyone knows me, we were playing volleyball yesterday, and you would think it was the Olympics. Like, there's certain things that so military is very competitive, and you want to be the best. And it was like something that I could really throw myself into to go like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the best of the best soldiers.
Isn't there a drill sergeant telling me
I'm a piece of whatever, and which for me, so the other kids next to me, well, yeah, exactly. The other kids next to me are crying, and I'm like, this is like a breeze. I was like, this is. So, and that's really the funny part is I was so used to that kind of environment. It didn't. And my dad was ex-Marine, so I say jump, you say how high, and he didn't. There was no emotion in him. It was
drunk or not drunk.
Drunk. It was just more intense of anger. So. So went into the military, served, and I probably would have stayed military. My whole plan was to do career military, and random met a gal through a buddy for 4th of July, drove down to Naples, Florida, met a girl down there, and it was right when I was coming up to re-enlist.
It's all about the girl.
It's always a girl. And you imagine you're in Georgia, and I was in a rapid deployment unit, so I went to Iraq, I went to Kuwait, I went to Germany, I went to Egypt, went all over, and did military stuff. So I went down to Naples, Florida. And if you've ever been to Naples, it's like one of the most beautiful places.
It's gone now, but
yeah, unfortunately, I know of all things to talk about, and for Naples. And I went down there and I started meeting people, and people were making 10 times what I was making in the military at the time, because I was enlisted. I wasn't an officer. I'm like a grunt, what they call a grunt. And I was like waiters were making like 80 grand in Naples, and I was like, I can barely buy beer. That's how bad the funding is when you're enlisted, unless you move up into the higher ranks. So made a decision to move down there, got a job at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Naples, Florida as a cabana boy. So I had like the K-Swisses on. Yeah, cabana boys, and I'm out there bringing you, cocktails, setting up your towels with little, dolphins or whatever, the swans and all this. And it was the perfect balance. I really got lucky because I had military. Then the Ritz-Carlton's training was amazing. I went through their program. I went from a cabana boy to pool supervisor to fitness center supervisor to front of the desk, and I went through those ranks because if you give me a structure, I was like, I can run with it.
Didn't anybody go back in time to see where you
because it's
been?
all sealed. So so once your juvenile record is sealed, so even on a background check, not all, depending on how your caseworker worked things and your guardian ad litem, negotiated things. But yeah, there was no way that they could see what I had done, which was great.
In the
luckily.
service, traveling around, did you realize what an opportunity?
Oh, massive. Yeah. I mean,
it's like an oxymoron. You're blowing up people and traveling.
Yes, and seeing the world and realizing how lucky we are and realizing so many different things and being in another. And a lot of the guys I was in with went through similar childhoods as me. The Army was a way to get out It wasn't like we all woke up and were like, let's join the Army. No, it wasn't like we were like West Point cadets. We were like, it's this or prison, pretty much, or working at a gas station, right? That was where like
You
the
were
option-
haunted by that gas
Oh
station.
man, yeah, because you just you see it, and even the kids we talk to now in our internship program, one of the kids, I was like, so what's like, if you could be anything you want on earth, anything, he was like, I want to work the concession stand at the movie theater. Like that's the pinnacle of their, because they think if even they could get there, like compared to their family and what they came through, it's like, wow, I'm fully employed. Like the bar is so low. So we have to like reprogram them and go, hold on, like we got to reset this. So that's not easy, right? You're conditionalized for so long to be the way that you are.
What's the average age?
So third way is 11 through about 23 into the aftercare programs. Usually you see about 11 to 18. That's probably the biggest range.
Hardest years to change.
Yes. Oh yeah, and again, everything is messing with you at those points. I was lucky because I had third way, military, and Ritz-Carlton, and so I mean, sliding doors, like if those three wouldn't have been a combination, then after I worked for Ritz-Carlton, I went and worked for Halliburton, which is a large wartime construction company, and I went back overseas when we were removing Saddam because they needed someone, think how weird this is, they needed someone that had wartime experience and luxury hotel experience.
Wow.
So I went and facilitated hotels in Kuwait and in the Green Zone in Baghdad for high-end foreign officials, which is like the weirdest job on earth, paid amazing. And it was tax-free because, again, you were in, we were in a war zone. This was like, I was literally there when they brought in Saddam Hussein after digging him out of this hole, into the Green Zone. And it was pretty crazy. But that's what got me the ability to go into real estate is I made a lot of money working overseas in wartime scenarios, came back and got my real estate license thinking that I was going to go into property management because I was doing kind of property management for Halliburton. And I was sitting in the real estate class and I was talking to the instructor and he was like, you're not going into property management. He was like, you talk way too much. He was like, you have too much energy. No offense to property managers, but he was like, you have to go into general real estate. And I was like, I never really thought about it.
Who was your teacher?
This was in Florida.
Oh.
I went back. I ended up going back to Naples, Florida. Me and that girl didn't end up working out, but now Florida was more.
Where
or less
is that
home
girl?
to- who knows? God bless her. So I ended up becoming a real estate assistant after I got my license to a top producer, who's still a top producer in Florida, named Susan Heller. Big Mike Ferry agent, Mike Ferry, the coaching company. It's like this hardcore, like you make 100 calls a day, and like you hustle.
For $9.99.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And watching her, she was making about $1.5 million at the time, and it just opened my eyes, and I was like, I never realized there was this freedom that you could get from real estate as an entrepreneur that if you just worked really hard and practiced and studied and did the right things that real estate agents do, there's nothing that could stop you. Like there's literally, I have a GED. I have a GED, and I was making well over. I was making probably my second or third year. So I started out as her assistant. Then I became an agent on her team, and this is way back when like there wasn't really teams. It was kind of like she just gave me stuff she didn't want to deal with. I was kind of like her lackey. But I think by my third year, I was making like $450,000.
Why do you think the doors opened for you?
I don't know if they opened. I think
Slid.
I kind of bumbled into them probably a little bit. So I got lucky. I had people that cared, which is why I'm very much paying it forward now. Like I had mentors at the Ritz-Carlton. I had great mentors at Third Way. I don't know if I had mentors in the military. I had people that yelled at me a lot in the military. That was probably what I needed at that time.
Comforting.
Yes, yeah. But it gave me bumpers. I got bumpers, and I took a lot of risks. When I was at the Ritz, I could have stayed working at the Ritz, but when I got the call to go into a wartime, country, And I go, you want me to go where? And then and they go, well, let me tell you how much it pays. And I was like, where do I go? I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. So I did a lot of things where I would put myself in peril probably.
You weren't afraid of danger.
I wasn't really afraid, and I really didn't care because I was always motivated by fear. I had nowhere else. Unlike, I think what limits some people is they can go home and cry to mom. I don't make it. I'm on the street. There literally is. I think a lot of that was there was no going back to anywhere. And I'm talking my entire family. So my family was my mom and her family was disowned by her family. So there was no grandparents. To this day, I don't know a single person in my entire family tree. Don't talk to anyone. I mean, and it's been that way for years. I mean, since, again, third way. So, yeah. I don't know if it was, sliding doors, luck.
Who pays for third way? It's all donation.
Great question. Well, there's multiple things. So yes, fundraising is a huge piece that we do. We have a huge event every year, and then several other small events. Then a lot of it is still funded through the government because the kids have to go somewhere. So what happens is either a kid can't be at home or has been abused to the point that something's gone wrong. The detention centers fill up because they can only house so many people. It's kind of like the regular prison problem in a lot of ways. Then you have foster care, which these people that say are licensed, like Miss Willis, I probably got lucky again, was a nice saint lady. There's tons of foster homes that are abusive. They're rapists and weirdos. And they're getting their license like through the state, which is barely funded to do all of this. So it's a massive problem, and that's what we try to bring awareness to is the amount that it's costing all of us as taxpayers to not handle and treat these kids correctly in the beginning. Then they go into the regular correctional facility, which a normal prisoner takes, $100,000 a year from taxpayers' money to pay for, which is a huge cost and depression on the entire economics of this tragedy. So the goal is so partially it's funded by the government, partially it's funded by some of them if the parents, because not all the parents are also down out. There's also some kids in there where parents are quite wealthy. They're just child molesters. I don't know how else to say it. I was in one of the several of the people that I was in there with where their mom knew that their uncle was raping them for years and just never said anything. So the trauma that girl dealt with from a wealthy family. So if there's funding available from the family, they will also build a family to a certain degree. So family pays, government pays, fundraising pays, and that's how the funding works. So it's almost like a really insane way behind the scenes. It's like a large hotel. So we have occupancy. We know how many beds are available. We know what treatment levels for what kids are necessary. We have a single mom's house. So you have, because you can't put moms and babies and with the other, all this whole population. And then you have to staff it. So we have about 192 staff member to take care of any given time, 100 kids, because it's 24-hour day care. So it's a $10 million a year nonprofit.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is it like a home environment? Do you start in like it's a kitchen, a bed, a pillow?
Yep. Yeah. In a weird way, yes. So the
closet for your clothes?
Yes. So there's bedrooms. So yeah, you have like I almost equate it to like if you ever watch like The Real World on TV, like on MTV or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's like
fun like that.
No. Except with a lot, because also for those kids that could the main goal with their way is can we get the families back together? Is that possible, right? Like, is there treatment? Not for the ones that have suffered, criminal things to them, but like the real goal would be, hey, how do we get, because the best situation is if you could actually go home for most kids, right? Like it's just.
But abused kids always wanted to go to their parents?
No. Like same. I had so many kids that they would do a crime to get reincarcerated so they wouldn't have to go back home, which is just sad.
And how do you know if the family is?
That's the hard part. There's evaluation. The caseworkers have to go and visit the kids after they get placed back into the house, and there's this whole process. And so, it's crazy. So when you look at, I guess, it as a whole, the goal is just how can we treat it? How can we give hope? And how can we educate? And then how can we follow up? So the way that I ended up back with Third Way Center was, I hadn't really talked to anyone from there since I was probably 17. And I ended up coming back to Colorado to do real estate here after, doing it in Naples.
A girl brought you back?
No, not a girl. No. Just if you've ever lived in Naples, it's like a retirement community.
Yes,
so
I
like
know.
the lights literally stop at 8:30 and the whole town falls asleep because
Headless
everyone's 90.
cars, yeah.
So I was like, and I love fly fishing, I love snowboarding, I love all this. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go back. And so I started real estate from scratch again. And again, I didn't know anyone here because I didn't go to, the last people I went to school with, I think was 6th grade, 7th grade. And obviously my family, from what I found out, are now in Florida, weird enough, in like Ocala, because Third Way kind of gave me some insight because they had, kind of figured out where they were at.
Is that part of the program?
Yeah, they try to. They really do. It's difficult because it's a massive amount of work to track all of these people. So one of the people at Third Way, she connected with me because they wanted to talk to someone that had been through the program, and they were trying to follow up to see where people were at in their lives. And so met with her, started talking about the program, and I was like, I really think I can help. I think there are some things I could do here, especially from my perspective as a resident. And there's very few of us that, to be very quite honest, as good as a job as Third Way does, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say 90% of the people that make it through are not
Working at the gas station?
exactly. Like it's a lot of them still get incarcerated. A lot of them still have major issues. A lot of them. So to make me the poster boy, if you will, I was excited to take that on because I think it was needed to show that you can hopefully, not only survive but thrive through this. And so they asked me to start speaking and start going to their engagements. And then I got on the board of directors. And then I went from that to the vice president to now recently the president. And now our goal is to open up we're really focusing on just a sole traumatic brain injury home where we have, brain scan analysis abilities and just taking it to the whole next level so we can not only show everyone that this is such a massive piece, but really we collect data to provide to the government because that also helps with the funding and saying, okay, instead of putting this kid in detention, we should probably have him in a hospital first, then diagnose it, then medicate and treat it, and then he probably won't end up going or she won't end up going back to jail or going to jail in period or period at the end of the story. So
So
that's
now
what we're
you're
focused on.
in the system, but in a different way.
Completely. And now it's more politics
Yeah.
and government and legislation and, who's in office matters because the different parties see completely different ways of how this should be handled. Some people say, as you know, the different parties are, let's have a lot of money for social services. And then another party goes, we don't care. We're not going to fund anything because it
Who
takes
cares
taxpayers'
about
money.
these kids?
A lot of great people. People that are in this, obviously people that have come through those types of situations care. A lot of the parents care too. And I don't want to put this all like it was all bad parents. Some kids, they had great parents. The kid just had brain damage more than likely or some sort of brain issue. And the parents didn't know what else to do. They're like, we don't know why Susie's lighting things on fire. They just, what do you do next? Okay, well, let's get her a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist starts, and again, so there's so many of these things, but they don't know what the extreme level is. So a lot of great people care about it. A lot of our major donors, in fact, our large banks, Community Banks of Colorado is one of our big partners, and they're fantastic. So there's a lot of people because usually the story you'll hear is, and there's a lot of, unfortunately, I hate to say this, there's a lot of suicide. So you'll hear a lot of families that go, I lost my brother or my cousin or my son to suicide when he was 16 because I'm pretty sure he wasn't treated or diagnosed correctly. So they still deal with that hurt and that guilt. So they go, how can I support? And usually that's with a check and or political influence.
Eastern medicine or Western medicine?
Both. Actually, a lot of both. And I would say a lot, probably more Western for a lot of this is because when you're dealing with chemical imbalances, you have to treat that with medication. And so we have some of the best, staff that's available out there to focus on this. One of the executive director has been with the Third Way. He was my counselor when I was there. He's been with them for 43 years, right? Hildegard, the one that started this whole process, she's been there, I think, 45 years. So we've got...
You're a lifer.
They are. And almost all the counselors are because they see how much work is needed. And you feel bad for these kids. I mean, you see these kids come through, and once you start hearing the stories and the abuse, and
you have a story.
Well, everyone. But I also say this: everyone has a story. Are some more extreme than others? Yes, obviously. But it's are we equipped to deal with that story? And if we're not, are we honest enough to ourselves to say, I need help, and maybe I need medication. Not me, but I'm going to say maybe, or I need therapy, or I need counseling. I think the world looks at it, especially in the male culture, that it's weakness. Like even some of my buddies right now are struggling with alcohol and things like that, and we won't be like, "Hey, man, you talking to anybody about it?" Like they'd be like, "No, dude, I'm fine." Like just give me a beer. So it's still a taboo, if you will, to have mental illness or these types of things that affect you. And I think as we can make people more, as we can make people more comfortable with things, we're probably going to learn it's affecting a lot more people than we really even know.
Yeah, it's a popular issue.
It's big time.
Who was your mentor?
So I had a mentor at the Ritz-Carlton. His name was John Timmerman, and he was an ex-Navy SEAL. So I think he took to me because I was rough. You got to remember, Ritz-Carlton is ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. That's our credo. And I was about the furthest thing away from a gentleman when I started working there because I had just come out of the military. My head was shaved. Now this is not by choice, but back then it was, my head was shaved and, every other word was F, because I was just around dudes all the time and like shooting guns and stuff. And so luckily when I came in, he, I think, just had a soft spot in his heart for me, and he was brilliant. He's the CEO of like Hilton now. Like he went to do on big successful things. But no, he just sat me down, and I remember having, meetings with him, and he just kind of explained to me how to be a professional and how perception is so huge. I used to think that because my anger, I was like, I don't give a F what you think about me, right? Like if you don't like me, that's your fault. And he really taught me that if you want to, make it far in this world, perception, and you have to get people to come with you, right? And if everyone thinks that you're a dick, right, it's going to make if you're a scumbag, it's going to be harder to do that. So he helped me. He refined me quite a bit, and he spent a lot more time with me than he probably should have. So, yeah.
Is that the lesson that you carry on from him?
Oh, that's the whole.
The one thing.
Yeah, the
right?
one thing. Exactly. It's all who you surround yourself with, and I think that's why mentorship, and whether it's big brother, big sister, whether it's we have a mentorship program through Third Way Center, you don't realize the influence that, just you meeting with somebody once a month could make on the entire rest of their life, and we just kind of think it's la-di-da, but it makes a big difference. So
where are you? Okay, you can't say. Where are your houses?
I can't really, we wouldn't disclose the locations, but they're basically in the general Front Range area. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you built a school?
Yeah, so Third Way Center, so now we have our own school with our own accreditations and teachers, and it's fully staffed, and kids go there from all 5 houses every single day. So because that was the problem, like when I was there, they didn't have that. So you were taking kids to random high schools as group home kids. It was just it would never, it was just such a hard environment. And like I said, I think it caused more hurt because the kids felt so weird.
But how do you integrate those kids?
And that is the challenge. So usually you don't really integrate them until they go to Metro College. So I know like Metro State downtown does a lot with Third Way, where because we have a graduation every 6 months for where the kids are at, and it's an amazing. I mean, to watch these kids graduate and then their stories and their families are there from like Pueblo and Durango and these weird, because we take kids from all over the state and we take kids from out of state because like Wyoming doesn't have facilities for the stuff like this. So we take a lot of kids from the outer lying regions to do this. So yeah, there's graduation, and then they hopefully assimilate either into a community college if they're of that level. Some kids still are at the point where this wasn't when I was there, where now we're dealing with like a lot more medically challenged kids than we were back when I was there. When I was there, it was more
emotional.
Yeah, emotional, and the last stop before we went to prison. Mm-hmm. A lot of the kids we have now, we're the last stop before they go to the hospital. Or we're actually the next stop when they get out of the hospital, right? So these are kids.
How sad is that?
Yeah, these are, and a lot of it is, cutters and multiple suicide attempts. We have kids that are 400 pounds that have obesity issues. We have kids that are 62 pounds because they have anorexia or all of this. So we're dealing with this slew of mental illness that causes these other things as well.
Would you say that the commonality from your day to today is attention? A cry for attention?
I would think it would be, yes, attention, and no, it's just pure anger. So much of it is just pure rage because you can't understand. I used to have this guilt for not a guilt, I used to have this anger that I could have been anything and I got screwed, right? Because of this, my parents, and because of this, and because of that. So you get to this, I'm a victim. And what I try to help the kids understanding is you're not a victim, right? Like there's kids, and again, thank goodness for the military. You think we have it bad. Yeah, go spend a day in downtown Baghdad. And you want to talk about a kid that, or a daughter there, be a girl in Saudi Arabia at age 11. Like, so we have it.
Can they
amazing.
Relate?
Yes, and I think because I got street credit because I was there, right? It's hard not to say that you couldn't help, but it'd be hard to hear it from someone that was like, you don't know what I'm going through. Like, again, that's why I think those that have to hopefully, go back and say, I was right where you were. I was in the same house, because we've opened one more house since I was there, but all the houses have been the same this long, and that's true credit to the leadership there and all the staff. But you're trying to explain to them, yeah, look, like, I got you. Like, I know what you're feeling. I know I used to go to the same anger management course you had to go to, and the 6 boxes of pain and all of these, things that they try to teach you to go through. So I think being relatable helps quite a bit.
Were you afraid to go back?
I was. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because then you go through all of this stuff in your mind, and I'll just be very honest, where not that they want to make you a poster child, but now I'm still a human, and I'm still jacked up, and I still drink too much and go to Vegas and, I'm not a criminal. I'm not, I'm a normal degenerate. No, I'm just kidding. You know what I mean? But like, so now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be this role model. And oh my gosh, am I good enough to talk to these kids, right? So you go through this whole mental thing in your mind where you're like, people are like, oh, you made it. It's like, well, I didn't make it. I'm here. Like, again, yeah, I make a lot of money. Doesn't mean I'm a good person. I think I'm a good person, but it doesn't mean I'm necessarily a great person or I'm this, beacon of light that these kids should follow. I still get angry. I still cry. I still have issues. I still, sometimes can't sleep at night because of the trauma that I've gone through. Like, I have all that stuff. So when you sit there and you look at a kid and you're like, you should try to be like me, that's a huge weight. It's a different feeling. And when you get up on stage in front of a charity event for 1,000 donors, and you're trying to look at them all, and they're like, oh, you made it. And it's like, yeah, I made it through today, you know, but if I can get you to raise more money, maybe more kids won't, you know, will either be able to be okay, but at least they won't end up dead or in jail.
Isn't it interesting that you present well, so you're okay?
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I'm
nobody
not okay.
knows what
Yeah,
is
no.
going
Yeah,
on in your
it's like,
mind.
I am not okay. Yeah, yeah. And I think, but
And if you were to tell those donors, I'm still fucked up.
yeah, I'm still fragile. And,
Yeah, that's a better word.
Yeah.
What do you think they would say?
I think you can't. I think I have to be that light that says the program works. And so are a few other of great people that I know. Like there's a few of us that have made it through. Her name's Jean Smith. She's an attorney now, and she's on our board, and she does a lot of work. We were in the same house together. How bizarre is this? During the same time, and now we're both on the board of directors. But both of us, if you were to talk to both of us, we'd both be like, oh, we are both screwed up. Like we are both, we've got trauma. I mean, it doesn't end. It's like if you have PTSD from the military, which I have a little bit of that, I'm sure as well, because again, I had a combination of all that. It's like it doesn't go away. There's not a day that goes by where you don't think about these things. And even just several years ago, my ex-girlfriend was, what they say in these cycles is you usually find other people that are similar to the trauma that you went through. So not understanding this and not having the proper education or counseling on it, I ended up dating a girl who was a severe alcoholic. And we ended up breaking up. I put her in rehab, paid for rehab. It was like $30,000, paid for her to go to rehab, gets out of rehab. Her parents won't take her back because she's been, because she had nowhere to go. So I let her stay at my place. And again, we're not dating, just as a friend. And she ends up hanging herself. Yeah. From my stairwell with a volleyball rope from my volleyball set in my garage. So.
That's an imprint.
Yeah. So that stuff doesn't go away. And then you have to go to that funeral, and then you're questioning, could I have done more? And when we got the call, because we knew something was going on that day, me and my buddy Scott, who was my roommate at the time, right? So my point being is like, yeah, you don't know what's going to happen, but you get this call, and she's acting irate because she was going to have to go back to rehab again, and she was like, I'm not going back, blah 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 blah. And then you get to the house, she's barricaded herself inside my home. And the cops have to use the jaws of, kick in the door, basically, to smash it. And she's, hanging from a volleyball rope, So that stuff sucks. And and then you have the guilt of, like I said, did I do enough? And how did I even get here? And why was I, and she had a 6-year-old daughter, that now has to live. So then the cycle repeats. And now that kid's going to need therapy, which who knows if she's getting it or not, because her dad lives up in Conover and is a whack job. Life. So I wish it was like, yeah, I think some people think it's like, oh, you're great, you made it. It's like, no, there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel like crying or yelling or freaking out. It's just, I also think though that I'm very lucky and that, we got to keep moving, and there's more people to help, and through helping others, I think you end up realizing more of why you're screwed up. Or why I'm screwed up.
I'm screwed up too.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So that's how I see it anyway.
You mentioned job training?
Yeah, our internship.
Yes.
Program. Yeah, so with the kids, we bring them to our real estate office in Cherry Creek, and we've had a couple rotations now. And we do everything with them, from cold calling, because we call and just really try to get them into it, to marketing,
self-serving,
to marketing, and it's interesting to see these kids and how many different personalities are, and you see the disc profile happening, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a little high I, and there'll be this super flamboyant kid who loves getting on the phone, and then you'll have someone that won't say 3 words that is totally introverted and terrified, and just trying to talk to them and go, And in our real estate office, we have all those characters, right? We have people that are the accountants, we have the marketing people, we have the dolphin agents, we have the drivers and the tigers, and all these things. And so they kind of throughout, as we rotate them through, you usually watch them buddy up with the person that is more similar to them. And it's so fascinating. And then they go, wow, well, there's someone else out there like me that's professional and dresses and looks normal and whether they are or not behind the scenes, it's just to be determined. But it inspires hope, and I think that's the biggest thing to do with all of these kids is let them know that there's more than the cards you got dealt. Right?
Are
There's more to
there
this.
other companies that do that?
Yes. So there are very few now. So there used to be a lot, and then funding is an issue. The state funding, especially drops dramatically depending upon who's politically in office at the time. There's a lot of lawsuits. There's a lot of, for example, let's just say that a kid goes ballistic and needs to be restrained. Could be something that goes wrong there. Let's say that one of the counselors at another facility made it through all the background checks and is a sex offender and preys on 16-year-old girls. It's so many moving factors all the time that you're dealing with. So you're trying to keep these facilities open and you're trying to keep it monitored and inspected because
Healthcare?
and just there's a lot of sick people out there. There's a lot of sick people that get into these types of things so they can do bad things to people.
How do kids get there? Can I, if, God forbid,
Sure.
my child, could I walk them in there?
No. You would have to, for those facilities, you would have to, there's an intake process. So, well, first, it would, 99% of the kids that we deal with don't come from an actual home. They come from a hospital or a detention center or a caseworker who's basically, we've had kids that have these stories you hear on 2020 that have got raised in a shipping container. We have those kind of kids, that were lived in a hole, type of stuff. So, no, it would have to be referred through an intake situation. Now, I'm sure there's other homes out there that maybe are less. Third way's the worst of the worst. It's the last road before suicide or long-term imprisonment.
It's a home, not a foster home?
Well, ours are therapeutic facilities. So ours are more
what do you
they're
call
more
it?
like campuses.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So one of ours is more like a campus where you have therapy. To say Eastern, we also realized as an organization that with the brain, 90% of a lot of the issues is diet. So all of our kids, you would think they were hyper vegans. You would think it was we're in Boulder. Because they realized that had a huge effect. Sugar, gluten, all of these things. They have yoga almost every day. So to say
mandatory?
Oh yeah. They realized that who knew exercise and a good diet also supports healthy brain activity, right? Instead of when I was there, I was chugging a Kool-Aid with 6 pounds of sugar, and I was bouncing off the walls. And because they've learned. It's 40 some odd years of progression.
I had a stroke.
Yes.
And part of my brain, they say, is dead.
Right.
Is that where and I have to rewire my brain.
Absolutely.
Are you trying to do that with the
Yes.
kids? Are there parts of their brains gone?
Absolutely. Massive parts gone, damaged, or a lot of it is even just locked out because of the trauma. So imagine you have this room that because you had this dark thing happen to you, you put that deadbolt on and you don't open it up. So that portion of your brain is no longer functioning.
Wow. And what your memories that you don't remember?
Gone.
Lock and key and
Gone.
lock?
Yeah. And then so then you have the option of like, all right, well, do I go through hypnosis? And that's also terrifying because, it's like somebody playing around in my brain. But it can also help. I mean, it just, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, and there's a lot of things of what you're willing to do. For me, I'm scared. I'm like, if they start unlocking these things, and what else are they going to unlock that then I feel good right now, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to play around in there anymore. Like, I'm okay.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. All of it. It's the brain. I mean, think about how many random thoughts you have in the course of a day. I mean, just things that you would never tell anyone, but it goes through your brain. So then mix that with massive amounts of hormones when you're 11 through 17, and you're trying to figure it all out. You're trying to figure it all out. So
How many
I think
people have that voice like you?
not enough. Yeah, I think.
Do you accept volunteers
Oh,
to help?
absolutely. Oh, tons. I mean, there's my director of operations. Her name's Meg Everett. She's a rock star. She just became accepted into our board of directors. She's been with Third Way. We have a young professional boards. They call it the associate board now because some of them weren't that young. Yeah. So we have events to build awareness. So we have people that are volunteers from age 21 to 75 or 90-year-old volunteers. It's usually once they get in. The hardest part about our world is, unlike a lot of other charities, it's rarely difficult for us to have you around the kids or even tell the kids' story because of sexual predators, because of all these other issues. So we can't have a kid come talk at a charity event and be like, yeah, I was, raped, repeatedly over and over. That's just trauma for them to have to disclose that. So it's hard for us to explain what's happening because you have limited access to the kids that are in it. Like in our internship program, everyone has to be background checked. We have this whole thing. I mean, it's not like you can just bring them to the office and it's like, come to work with mom day. It's nothing like that. So that's the challenge is how do you get these voiceless stories out to people so they can understand and then figure out how can I get involved to take action and make change.
What's the story you tell? If you're
Well, I can tell their stories. I mean.
Can you tell your story?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Because I'm okay now, but you can't. If it's not okay, but you can't tell a 16-year-old to go, come to our charity event to help us raise money and awareness. There's not a lot of times. It's not only money. It's we need help. I mean, we need mentors. We need this, but the toughest part about all this is to become a mentor. It might take 6 months to get approved because there's state regulations. You have to pass background checks. You have to be supervised because, unfortunately, there are predators out there, and it's a sad world to think about. It's like, even if you wanted to help today, we lose some volunteers because the process to be able to help because of the regulations, which are needed because of the weirdos, that's what makes it hard. Otherwise, I think a lot more people would be involved.
Do you think that you're challenged by the system?
Oh, yes.
You're there to help the system?
Every day, and that's why the leadership inside Third Way's organization with Dave Eisner and some of these founders of this program, I mean, they're much more politicians. They're navigating all of these things to try to, because I mean, just recently they were coming out with a rule that said unless the kids have had provable, treatable medical issues, whatever, then we're going to put them in foster care and not a treatment center. And they can do that with the stroke of a pen. Mm-hmm. So now, all of a sudden, these kids are going to these foster care homes that should have been in actual treatment because somebody in the
office,
top office decided, because someone told, signs off on something and they don't know. I mean, they're signing 55 million things a day, but with the stroke of a pen, $3 million in funding can go disappear in a second. So that's why being involved in the legislation and being involved on the political side of it is so critical.
Do the kids mentor the other kids?
Inside the system?
Yes.
Not as much as you would think.
By choice or?
Yeah, because, again, they're all dealing with their own universe. I mean, even at the highest level, the Emancipation House, every kid is just trying to survive. You know, it's like, where am I going to work? Where am I going to go? A lot of times, some of the kids will end up in trade schools, so they'll either be a mechanic or an engineer of some. You know, I'm not even saying engineer, but more, more like my dad. Like they'd run a printing press or something like that. So
Where's
they go
the
to these
money
trade
for the
schools.
kid?
Where's the money?
Yeah, like I graduate.
Yeah. So job placement, then we usually can assist with housing. So whether it's free housing, assisted housing, those are those things that we can help out with. And then usually they move on. I mean, they work jobs and end up doing this, and that's where the extra funding would need, which we don't have right now, where it's like, what happens from 20 to 30, right? We can only basically handle up until a certain degree, and then we're here for you. But most kids, and plus, because they're coming from all over the region, they go back to Casper, Wyoming. They go back to Durango. They go back to, these random, not that those are random places, but they go, love Casper, Wyoming. But so it would take a full-time staff to follow up with them.
I have a girlfriend who works in the prison system, and she tells me stories about the halfway houses, but the girls don't know how to use a phone,
Correct.
how to buy a tampon, how to take the bus.
Exactly right. Yeah. This is because, again, we're servicing at any given time 100 kids. There's probably 3,000 minimum that are needing this type of heavy help that are either on a wait list, can't get into the program, or even if there was room, there's not funding for it to be authorized because you have to go through this like check down of, all these things to get them in there. It's not like just every day all of a sudden kid with need matches with the center and it's like, yay. It's
a long process.
It's bureaucracy, it's red tape, it's a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's sometimes luck. I look back. I mean, there was plenty of guys that had similar situations at me that are still in prison to this day. Were in prison that ended up going and doing more crimes that carried over their sentence to adults. And so they go straight from there. Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
What's your goal?
My goal is to provide hope. I think one of the things that I realized because I used to ask myself that, I was like, what do I want to do, especially now as president? The two things I want to do is really bring a focus to TBI, traumatic brain injury, and make sure that people understand that kids aren't born bad, right? Kids don't wake up and go, you know what, I want to rob that house or steal that car. That there is a large percentage, if not all, that have a medical issue that was not diagnosed correctly early on that we can fix. And then the second thing is for the kids that are in the system to hopefully let them know that, there's plenty you can do in this world. Just because you got screwed in this aspect doesn't mean that that's what's in front of you.
And your legacy?
Legacy will be to help more kids. So with Third Way right now, my goal is to, if we can serve 100, why can't we serve 200?
Why can't you?
Because it's a ton. I mean, the biggest thing is staff. So to have the level of clinical therapists, you gotta have a therapist that is okay with being poor. Because it's just like school teachers in this system.
Passion.
Yeah, you could go be a private psychologist, make a fortune. You come work for Third Way, you're going to be compensated, but you're not going to make the same amount of private practice, and you're going to be dealing with, instead of why is, I think of like a regular practice where Susie's dealing with biting her nails. You've got a kid that just shoved a pencil into some kid's eye the day before. So it takes a bulletproof, mentality to do that role, and not a lot of money.
And why do they do it?
Because they love kids and they love helping, and they're like nurses. They're like the saints of the world. It's like,
and how do they not get attached?
They do. They get very attached, and I think, and that's in it wears on them. You know, I mean, it's just like how your friend in the prison said, you know, it's just like, it's like you see this world and they have to go home with that and these stories in their head. And so, yeah, it's so to help more kids, more staff, more money, more awareness, and that's what we're going to do. I mean, it's all doable. It's just, but it's not like opening up a McDonald's. You know, I wish it was. It's like, and they get frustrated with me because that's how my mind works. Is I go, okay, well, we can do this, and they're like, yes, but and I'm like, oh,
Big
yeah.
picture.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, so we just open up a house, put some counselors in there, and stick some kids in there, and I was like, in my mind, it should be that simple. But there's a million moving pieces that have to happen to open up just 10 more beds. There's so much that needs to happen. So I think the goal is to figure out how to grease that and make it faster, and so we can do that at a higher level. So that's what my time as president and far after that will be, is my ability to open up more beds.
So you're moving people because I learned about you at a dinner party.
Yeah.
And a woman told me about your charity. So I want to help. The website is?
Yeah, so it's just thirdwaycenter.com. So Third Way Center, we have a huge event coming up that's called True Grit. It's in October. You'll see it on the website. Just go to thirdwaycenter.com. You can do just donations. If you want to be a mentor, you can call me personally anytime, and I'll get you in, and we can talk about what you're looking to do and how you want to help. But yeah, we need the help, and the ability for us to do this it's right there, right? We just need more people and more money. Give us the money. No, just kidding. Money always helps.
Please.
Money always helps.
Please, right?
Yes, please give us the money. But if you can't give money, I always tell people give time. You know, there was a long period there where I know I couldn't give money, but at least I could give time. So whatever you can do,
Helps.
you're saving. You're going to save either their life or another generation, because this happens in cycles. That's all we're trying to do is stop. You hear it all the time, stop the cycle. People say that, but it's like, this is how you stop the cycle. You stop the cycle early, not later.
Well, thank you for sharing your power of a voice, because it takes courage to say, I am who I am today.
Just a hot mess trying to make it work.
Packaged nicely.
Packaged mess.
So thank you.
No, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.